March 28, 1945. Luxembourg City. Omar Bradley is bent over the situation maps at 12th Army Group headquarters. The war in Europe is 36 days from ending. American armies are crossing the Rhine. The Third Reich is crumbling from every direction, and then an aide walks in with a message that stops the room cold. George Patton has already done it. Without authorization, without consultation, without Bradley's knowledge. He has sent 300 American soldiers, 300 men, 60 miles behind German lines, at night, into the heart of occupied Germany, toward a POW camp that may or may not hold American prisoners. Bradley stares at the message. 300 men. 60 miles, no air support, no dedicated artillery, no way back if it goes wrong. The column has been out for nearly 2 days, and it has not turned back. Here is what makes it worse. Bradley reads on. The force has pushed through multiple German towns. It has taken casualties. It has lost vehicles. It has fought through German resistance at multiple points. And it is still going east. 60 miles behind the front line, a tiny American armored column is driving deeper into Germany as if it owns the roads. And Omar Bradley, the man in command of all American ground forces in Europe, had no idea it was happening until this moment. That is where this story begins. This is what American military courage looks like when it crosses into something darker. This is the story of Task Force Baum, the most audacious, most reckless, most devastating small unit operation of the entire European war. And the man who ordered it knew exactly why. By March 1945, the German military in the West is not what it was. The Wehrmacht that blitzed France in 6 weeks is gone. The Waffen-SS divisions that held the line at Kursk are ghost formations. The disciplined, mechanized German army that shocked the world in 1939 has been ground into rubble across 6 years of total war. But the Germans still have something the Americans cannot afford to underestimate: institutional stubbornness. In the interior of Germany, east of the Rhine, away from the main front, German commanders still believe their lines are secure. They have rear area security forces. They have training battalions, they have Volkssturm militia and cadets pulled from nearby military schools, and they have pockets of genuine combat power, tank destroyer units, flak batteries, combat engineers. The German commanders responsible for the Hammelburg corridor, the stretch of territory between the Rhine and the POW camp at XIII-B, operate on one core assumption. No American commander would be reckless enough to send a small force 60 miles into their rear. It is, by any standard military calculation, a suicidal proposition. You need mass to penetrate defended terrain. You need logistics to sustain a force over that distance. You need air cover to survive in daylight. You need artillery to suppress enemy strongpoints. A 300-man task force has none of those things, so the Germans do not prepare for it. They harden their frontline positions. They reinforce their bridges. They plan for the main American thrust, which is moving north, into the Ruhr, toward Berlin. They do not plan for a ghost column moving east through their backyard. That assumption of German strategic common sense is the first thing Task Force Baum will shatter. Here is the paradox at the heart of this story. The raid on Hammelburg is either one of the most daring acts in American military history or one of the most reckless abuses of command authority ever committed by a senior American general. Depending on who you ask, it is both. Because XIII-B is not just any POW camp. Inside that camp, among the 1,300 American officers held there, is Lieutenant Colonel John K. Waters. Waters is not famous. He is not a general. He is a mid-grade Army officer who has been a prisoner of the Germans since the fall of Tunisia in 1943. But John Waters is married to Beatrice Patton. He is George Patton's son-in-law. And when Patton learns his son-in-law is in that camp, the calculation changes. The war stops being a campaign. It becomes something personal. That is where the trouble begins. Captain Abe Baum is not a man who was born for this moment. He grew up in the Bronx, New York. Before the war, he worked in the garment district, cutting patterns for women's clothing in a Manhattan factory. He was 24 years old when Pearl Harbor changed his life. Baum did not come from a military family. He did not graduate from West Point. He did not have connections or patrons or political cover. What he had was instinct, an eye for terrain, a cold ability to read a situation fast and make a decision before the moment passed. The Army discovered these qualities the way it discovers most things in wartime, by throwing a man into combat and seeing what comes out. By March 1945, Baum is a decorated combat officer with the 4th Armored Division, the spearhead unit of Patton's Third Army. He has fought from Normandy to the Rhine. He knows what an armored task force can do and what it cannot. He is the man Patton's staff selects to lead this mission. He is the man who will be handed an order that does not add up and told to execute it anyway. Let's talk about what Task Force Baum actually is. The numbers matter here, because the numbers tell you immediately how this story ends. The force that rolls out on the night of March 26, 1945, consists of approximately 293 to 314 men, depending on which roster you use. The U.S. Army's own after-action records and the definitive study by Tobin Green put the strength at roughly 307, call it 300 for the math that follows. The vehicles: 10 M4 Sherman medium tanks, 6 M5 Stuart light tanks, 27 half-tracks, 3 105 mm self-propelled assault guns, 7 jeeps, and 6 trucks. 57 vehicles total, for 300 men, going 60 miles into enemy-held Germany. Now let's look at the math. The fastest a Sherman can safely travel on dark German roads in blackout conditions, no headlights, no moonlight, enemy territory, is roughly 15 miles per hour. In practice, with villages to clear and bridges to secure, the average drops below that. The distance from the task force's starting point near Aschaffenburg to Auflag XIII-B near Hammelburg is approximately 60 miles one way. Round trip, 120 miles minimum. The task force carries enough fuel for approximately that distance. There is no fuel depot along the route. There is no resupply plan. There is no fallback point. There are no pre-positioned emergency reserves. This is a one-shot operation with no margin for error. No dedicated air support will accompany the column. The friendly artillery that can range the first few miles of the route will be out of range within hours. Once the task force pushes past about 20 miles, it is on its own in every military sense. No fire support, no reinforcement, no extraction if it goes wrong. Every military planner who looks at these numbers reaches the same conclusion. This is not a raid. It is a bet. A bet on speed, surprise, and German confusion being so complete that 300 men can do what 3,000 would struggle to accomplish. Baum knows this. His commanders know this. The question is whether Patton knows it or whether he simply does not care. Picture the column moving east through the German night. No headlights. The Shermans roll at near idle, their engines a low grinding vibration through the March cold. The half-track commanders stand in their hatches, helmets low, scanning darkness for shapes that should not be there. The roads are wet. The villages they pass through are blacked out, every window dark, every door shut. But the column's noise travels. Engines carry in cold air. German civilians wake to the sound and lie still, not knowing if what they're hearing is their army or the Americans. Baum rides near the front, reading a map with a red-filtered flashlight. The map is wrong in places. The roads are not exactly where the map says they are. In one section, a marked bridge turns out to be a ruin. They detour. They lose time. Every minute of darkness they waste is a minute of daylight they will have to spend inside Germany without cover. The column keeps moving east. 60 miles, the distance from New York to Philadelphia, except every mile of it is occupied by an army that wants them dead. March 26, 1945. XIII Corps Headquarters. Patton arrives and gives the order face-to-face. Major General Manton Eddy, C Corps Commander, objects. The raid will pull combat power away from the main northward push. Brigadier General William Hogue objects. The force is too small. Brigadier General Creighton Abrams, the officer who will one day command all U.S. forces in Vietnam, argues that if this raid is worth doing, it is worth doing right. Send a full combat command. Hundreds more vehicles. Real mass. Patton overrides them all. He calls Captain Baum forward. He tells him the mission. He tells him the risks. And then, according to documented accounts, Patton makes a promise, get those men out, and he will recommend Baum for the Medal of Honor. Baum takes the order. The column rolls east that evening. The German defenders of the Hammelburg corridor make 3 critical mistakes. The first is organizational. The rear area security forces in that part of Germany in March 1945 are a patchwork, training battalions, Volkssturm militiamen, officer candidates pulled from nearby military academies, and scattered combat veterans too old or too wounded for frontline duty. These are not cowards. Some of them will fight hard. But they are not a coherent defensive force. They have overlapping jurisdictions, poor communications, and no single commander who sees the whole picture. The second mistake is intelligence. German commanders know the Americans have crossed the Rhine in multiple places. They know the main threat axis is north toward the Ruhr. Nothing in their intelligence picture suggests a deep penetration into the Hammelburg area. When the first reports of American vehicles moving east start coming in on the night of March 26th, many German commanders initially believe the reports are exaggerated. A small patrol, perhaps, or a lost convoy. By the time they understand what is actually moving through their rear, Task Force Baum is already 20 miles inside their lines. The third mistake is reaction speed. German communications in the area are degraded. Phone lines are cut or unreliable. Radio nets are congested. The German ability to quickly mass forces to intercept the column is severely hampered by the time it takes to understand what is happening and issue coherent orders. These three failures buy Task Force Baum its window. They are not enough, but they are the reason the raid gets as far as it does. Here is what American industrial and military doctrine put in Baum's hands that night. The Sherman tank gets a bad reputation in the history books. Post-war accounts, particularly those written by veterans who faced German Panthers and Tigers, emphasize its disadvantages. The relatively thin armor, the high silhouette, the early tendency for its ammunition to catch fire. But the Sherman was not built to duel Tigers. It was built to move. It was built in vast numbers, more than 49,000 produced by American factories over the course of the war. It was built to be maintained in the field, repaired quickly, and replaced when lost. And by 1945, it carried improved ammunition, upgraded armor packages, and the experience of 3 years of combat evolution. The M5 Stuart light tanks in Baum's column are faster still. Not as powerful, but built for the kind of rapid reconnaissance and screening that a deep raid requires. The half-tracks carry the infantry. The assault guns carry the fire support. 57 vehicles on a 60-mile road. In the hands of a well-trained American armored task force. That is not a small force. It is a scalpel. Fast, precise, capable of going places a larger force cannot. It is only a scalpel, though, and what waits at Hammelburg requires something closer to a sledgehammer. The first sign that this mission will not go according to plan comes at Schweinheim. Schweinheim is a town on the eastern approach to Aschaffenburg, one of the first obstacles Task Force Baum needs to clear on its route east. It should be a quick fight. The pre-mission intelligence suggests the resistance will be light. The intelligence is wrong. German defenders in Schweinheim hold longer than expected. The fighting is harder, closer, and more costly than planned. Baum waits, burning hours he cannot afford, while supporting elements try to clear a path. By the time the column gets through Schweinheim, the timeline is already broken. They were supposed to be deep inside German territory, while darkness was still their shield. Instead, they are fighting a street engagement while the clock ticks toward dawn. Every plan in combat has a shelf life. The plan for Task Force Baum expires somewhere in the streets of Schweinheim. The soldiers pay in blood for this delay. Vehicles are hit. Men are wounded. The column that finally pushes through is smaller and slower than the one that started, and the worst of it lies ahead. To understand what Abe Baum is facing, you need to understand who he is. Baum has been in combat since the breakout from Normandy. The 4th Armored Division, his division, is arguably the finest armored division in the U.S. Army by 1945. It is the unit that drove through the German lines and reached Bastogne in December 1944, breaking the siege of the 101st Airborne during the Battle of the Bulge. Baum was there for that. He has seen what armor can do when it moves fast and hits hard. He has also seen what happens when armor gets caught in close terrain without infantry support. He knows the difference. When Patton's staff selects him for this mission, Baum has questions. The math troubles him. 60 miles is a long way. The force feels thin. He asks about what they will find at the camp. He is told, approximately 300 prisoners. He can carry that many. It is tight, but it is doable. That number, 300, is the number he plans around. He does not know it is wrong by a factor of 4. He does not know that at 11 o'clock that night, once the column is deep inside Germany and there is no turning back, Patton's aide, Major Alexander Stiller, who has ridden along on this mission without Baum's full understanding of why, will finally tell him the truth. Major Stiller takes Baum aside in the darkness. He tells him that Colonel John Waters is in that camp. He tells him that Waters is married to Beatrice Patton. He tells him, in effect, that the entire operation, the 300 men, the 57 vehicles, the 60 miles of German-held territory, exists because George Patton wants his son-in-law back. Baum listens. He processes it. And then he keeps driving east, because there is nothing else to do. He is already 60 miles from home. The moment Stiller tells Baum the truth is the moment this story changes its nature. Up until that point, Task Force Baum is a bold military raid, dangerous, arguably undersized but legitimate in its military purpose. Freeing American prisoners of war is a valid mission. It has been done before. It will be done again. After that moment, the raid is something else. It is a personal rescue operation conducted by a 3-star general, using the blood and lives of 300 men, for a reason that no military authority above Patton has approved. Bradley, when he later reconstructs what happened, puts it in a single devastating sentence. Had George consulted him on the mission, he would have forbidden him to stage it. Think about what that means. The commander of all American ground forces in Europe, the man directly above Patton in the chain of command, says flatly that he would have stopped this before it started. He would have stopped it not because the objective was wrong. Freeing 1,300 American prisoners of war is not a wrong objective. He would have stopped it because the force was too small, because the planning was too rushed, because 60 miles behind enemy lines, with no resupply, no air support, and a map that did not fully match the terrain, 300 men were being sent to do a job that required 3,000. Bradley would have either sanctioned a full combat command, hundreds of vehicles, proper logistics, air coordination, or he would have waited until the main Allied advance reached the area naturally. Patton did not wait. How did this happen in 3 days? March 23, 1945. Patton's intelligence staff brings him a prisoner list. On that list, among hundreds of names, is Lieutenant Colonel John K. Waters. The camp, XIII-B, near Hammelburg. The location, approximately 60 miles east of the American front lines. Patton immediately begins planning. He does not convene a formal planning conference. He does not brief his corps commanders and ask for their assessment. He does not request air reconnaissance of the route or a detailed intelligence picture of German forces between the Rhine and Hammelburg. He makes some calls. He looks at a map. He picks a force size, small enough to move fast, he reasons, large enough to break through a prison camp's perimeter. He picks Baum. He pushes the mission through. By March 26th, 3 days after seeing Waters' name on a list, Task Force Baum is rolling east. 3 days. From a name on a prisoner list to 300 men crossing the German lines. That is the Patton method in its purest, most dangerous form. The speed that makes him the most feared American general in Europe is also the speed that makes him capable of catastrophic overreach. In the decades of military history that follow World War II, no staff officer who studies Hammelburg ever concludes that Patton had enough information, enough time, or enough force to make this mission succeed. He did it anyway. Let's put the two sides of this equation side by side. On the American side, Task Force Baum, roughly 300 men, 10 Shermans, 6 Stuarts, 27 half-tracks, 3 assault guns, 60 miles of road to cover, no fuel reserve, no air support, 1 radio net, 1 map, 1 mission. On the German side, waiting in the Hammelburg corridor, a patchwork that is thin in the first hours, but rapidly thickening. The initial German presence along the route is militia, training battalions, and cadets. In the first hours of March 27th, the column moves through German resistance that is real, but manageable. Baum loses vehicles. He takes casualties. But he keeps moving. Then the German picture changes. Near Gemden, Baum finds a bridge, a crossing that could accelerate his approach to the camp. German defenders blow it before he can use it. He must find another route. More time lost. A German reconnaissance aircraft, a single spotter plane, picks up the column in daylight. That is the moment everything accelerates on the German side. Local commanders now know exactly what they are facing. A small, but real American armored force. deep in the German rear, moving east toward Hammelburg. They begin sealing the roads. They call in every unit they can reach, engineers, infantry, cadets, and something far more dangerous. Waiting near the approaches to XIII-B is a veteran German Panzerjäger unit equipped with Elefant tank destroyers. 8 vehicles, each mounting an 88 PMM gun, the same weapon that could kill a Sherman at over a mile. 300 Americans are driving toward 8 Elefants. The fuel problem alone should have ended this mission before it began. Task Force Baum carries enough fuel for the round trip, in theory. But in theory assumes a straight road, no detours, no fighting, no vehicles idling for hours while infantry clears a town. Combat burns fuel at rates that planning calculations never fully capture. Tanks idling during a firefight. Half-tracks running their engines to keep radios powered. Vehicles taking alternate routes around blown bridges. By the time Baum is fighting his way through the approaches to Hammelburg, the fuel situation is already critical. He has consumed more than his plan anticipated because the fight has consumed more time than his plan anticipated. There is no fuel ahead of him. There is no fuel coming from behind him. The return trip, the one where he loads up prisoners and drives back 60 miles through a now alert German rear area, requires fuel he no longer has. That single fact, fuel, makes everything that follows not a military reversal, but a mathematical certainty. Task Force Baum is going to run out of fuel inside Germany. The only question is how many men will still be alive when it happens. Dawn breaks on March 27, 1945. Task Force Baum is approximately 35 miles from Hammelburg. It should have been there hours ago. It should have hit the camp in darkness, broken the perimeter, loaded the prisoners, and been on its way back before the Germans could organize a coherent response. Instead, Baum is 35 miles short, in daylight, on German roads, with a German reconnaissance plane circling overhead reporting his every move. Every German commander with troops anywhere near the route is now receiving a continuous update. There is an American armored column moving east. It is small. It can be caught. It can be killed. Baum is wounded in the hand during a firefight along the route. He keeps moving. The half-tracks take hits. One Sherman is lost. The column contracts, hardens, and presses east because turning back now means fighting the entire return route through an enemy that is actively closing in from behind. Forward is the only direction that makes sense. So Baum keeps going. 35 miles, 30, 25, and at some point in that long burning daylight drive, he stops thinking about what the mission is supposed to accomplish. He thinks only about what is directly ahead. Near the camp approaches, the Elefants are waiting. The Elefant, also called the Ferdinand, is not a tank. It is a tank destroyer. It sits low, moves slowly, and has limited ability to defend itself against infantry at close range. But it mounts one of the most effective anti-tank guns of the entire war, an 88 XIII-B Pak 43, capable of penetrating the frontal armor of a Sherman at ranges beyond 1,500 meters. 8 of them. Positioned along the roads Baum must use. This is not an ambush thrown together by panicking militia. This is professional German armor. In prepared positions, waiting for an enemy they now know is coming. Task Force Baum runs directly into them. The fighting near Hammelburg is the worst of the entire mission. Shermans are hit and burning. Half-tracks are shredded. Men who have ridden 60 miles through the German night are dying on the last stretch of road before the objective. But they do not stop. Baum pushes through the Elefant screen at cost. Vehicles lost. Men dead. The force now a fraction of what it was, and drives for the camp gate. And then he gets there. Task Force Baum reaches XIII-B on the evening of March 27, 1945. The camp perimeter is breached. The guards scatter or surrender. The gates come open. For 1 hour, one extraordinary, impossible hour, Task Force Baum stands inside a German prisoner of war camp 60 miles behind the front lines. It is one of the most audacious achievements of the entire European campaign. A tiny American armored force has driven through 60 miles of occupied Germany, fought through multiple engagements, punched through an Elefant screen, and cracked open the camp. For that 1 hour, the thing that was supposed to be impossible is real. Then Baum looks at what is inside. He was told to expect 300 prisoners. He finds 1,292 American officers, plus thousands of Serbian prisoners held in the same complex. Over 1,300 Americans, staring at him, some of them barely able to walk, many of them in the uniforms they were captured in, uniforms that are now rags after months or years of captivity. He cannot move them. He does not have the vehicles. He does not have the fuel. He does not have the manpower to escort that many men 60 miles back through an enemy that is now fully awake and actively hunting his column. Baum stands at the gate of XIII-B and makes a calculation he should never have had to make. He can take some of them, the ones who can fight, the ones who can ride on tank hulls and half-track fenders. He tells the rest to scatter, to hide, to evade, to find their own way west and hope that the main American advance reaches them in the days ahead. Then, somewhere in the chaos of that hour, word comes that Colonel John K. Waters has been shot. Waters went out as part of a parley party, a small group approaching the German guards to negotiate the camp's surrender. One German guard, either not understanding the situation or not accepting it, raised his weapon and fired. Waters went down with a serious wound. The man Patton sent 300 men 60 miles to save is now bleeding in the dirt of the camp he came to free. Baum loads what men he can and turns west. He does not get far. German forces have sealed every road. The column that fights its way out of the camp area is a shadow of what went in. Fewer vehicles, fewer men, almost no fuel, and an enemy force that has had hours to position itself across every viable escape route. The return fight is desperate. Vehicle by vehicle, the task force is stripped apart. Shermans are knocked out and abandoned. Half-tracks are hit and left burning. Men scatter into the German countryside, trying to reach American lines on foot alone in enemy territory. At some point during the collapse, the radio sends its final transmission back toward American lines. Task Force Baum is surrounded, under heavy fire, requesting air support. No air support comes. Baum gives his last order as a commander, every man for himself. He is captured shortly afterward, wounded for the second time. He will spend the final weeks of the war as a prisoner of the same Germans he came to fight. In the days that follow, the full picture of what happened at Hammelburg emerges piece by piece. Casualty counts vary by source, but the broad outline is stable. Approximately 32 men killed, somewhere around 250 more wounded, missing, or captured. A small number of the original force makes it back to American lines immediately. Waters, Baum, and many others are eventually liberated when the main U.S. advance reaches the Hammelburg area, days after the raid, exactly as Bradley believed it would. The 1,300 American officers who were inside XIII-B when Baum arrived are mostly still there when American forces officially liberate the camp. They were never going anywhere. Eisenhower's reaction reaches Washington on April 15, 1945. In his report to General Marshall, Eisenhower describes the operation in terms that leave no ambiguity. The raid was, in his judgment, exactly the kind of unauthorized action that a theater commander cannot tolerate. Reckless in conception, criminal in its ratio of risk to achievable result. Patton, confronted with the outcome, first tries to frame the raid as a diversion, a deliberate effort to confuse German forces about American intentions east of the Rhine. He argues it drew German attention and resources. No military historian studying the record has ever accepted that explanation at face value. Patton's more honest moment comes later, in his own reflection on what went wrong. He does not say the mission was wrong. He says his mistake was not sending more men. In his own words, he knew of no error he had made in the European campaign except that of failing to send a full combat command to take Hammelburg. Read that carefully. Even after the bloodshed, Patton believed the mission should have been attempted. His only regret is that he did not send enough force to make it succeed. Bradley sees it differently. His judgment on the raid is the most precise military verdict in the historical record. It was a story that began as a wild goose chase and ended in tragedy. That line does three things at once. It condemns the mission, it captures the arc, and it reframes everything that came before. The audacity, the courage, the impossible drive through 60 miles of German territory, as the product not of genius, but of a general who let the personal override the professional. Think of it this way. Imagine the best quarterback in the league. He has won championships. He reads defenses faster than any player in history. His arm is legendary. His instincts have won games that should have been lost. Now imagine that quarterback, in the fourth quarter of the biggest game of his career, ignoring the play call and improvising, not because the play is wrong, but because his brother-in-law is in the stands and he wants to look good for him. He throws a beautiful pass, 60 yards downfield, perfectly spiral. It sails right into the hands of a cornerback. His team loses. His teammates did everything right. They ran their routes. They blocked. They trusted the play. They lost because the man who mattered most was making decisions for the wrong reasons. That is Hammelburg. The lesson of this mission echoes through every American command school that studies it. The Army's doctrine of unified command, the principle that authority must match responsibility, that no commander acts unilaterally on objectives outside his operational zone without coordination, exists in part because of moments like this one. Today, American commanders at every level study Hammelburg not as a cautionary tale about bravery, but as a case study in what happens when personal motivation corrupts professional judgment. The question is not whether Patton cared about his son-in-law. Of course he did. He was human. The question is whether caring about his son-in-law made him a better commander of the Third Army. The answer, written in the blood of 300 men and the diplomatic fallout that followed, is clear. It did not. We return to Luxembourg City. March 28, 1945. Bradley's headquarters. He reads the message about Task Force Baum. He absorbs what it means. He does not immediately reach for a telephone to confront Patton. He does not file a formal report. He does not relieve Patton of command. What he does is wait. He waits because he knows what is coming. The column will not make it back. The mission will end in failure. The failure itself will be Patton's reprimand. And it is. Bradley later writes that he did not rebuke Patton for Hammelburg because failure itself was George's own worst punishment. That may be the most damning thing any superior has ever said about a subordinate. Not that he was wrong, not that he was relieved, not that he was court-martialed, but that the thing he did wrong punished him in ways no order ever could. George Patton died in December 1945, a car accident in Germany, 2 weeks before he was to return home. He never fully answered for Hammelburg in any formal sense, but he lived with it. And Abe Baum, the kid from the Bronx who cut women's clothing before the war and drove a Sherman tank 60 miles into Germany because a general told him to, went home, rebuilt his life, and never received the Medal of Honor Patton promised him. He received a Distinguished Service Cross instead. It is a high honor. It is not what he was promised. If this story changed how you think about Patton, if it complicated the legend, made the man more human, or made you want to understand the gap between what great commanders are and what they sometimes do, the subscribe button is right there. Every week, stories like this one, the ones history books mention in footnotes, the ones that deserve more than a paragraph. We will be here.